So good morning, everybody. This is the fourth session in this series of talks. And just to kind of review very briefly where we have been, the very first one, we talked about Brahman, Satyam, Jnanam, Anantam, Brahman. That was the assumption of Hinduism, particularly Advaita Vedanta. And in the second one, we looked at two corollaries of Brahman assumption, namely Atman and Tattvamasi. And in the third one, we talked about the second important assumption of Hinduism, which is cause and effect or causality. In particular, that there are two causes necessary to produce an effect, one being the material cause and the other being the process cause. So today we come to the question of creation of this universe. What is this universe and how was it created? So obviously people have been curious about this subject for an extraordinarily long time. And for example, there is this famous stanza in called Nasadiya Sukta in Rigveda, which answers the question of creation in this format. It says, who really knows? Who in this universe may declare it? Whence was this creation? Who knows whence it arose? He from whom the creation arose, he may uphold it or he may not. He who supervises this creation, he knows or he knows not. So it is conveying this belief that there must have been a creator, right? Much like a feast implies that there is a chef in the kitchen. But, and it exudes a certain sense of wonderment. Where did all this come from? And uncertainty that we may ever be able to find out, right? So this quest for what is this world, what is this universe, and where did it come from has been going on for thousands and thousands of years. And a number of answers have been proposed. There are lots of hypotheses. So, for example, there is one that says that, it is Vishnu who is reclining, and from the navel of Vishnu comes a lotus flower, and as that lotus flower blooms, God Brahma appears, the God of creation, and he creates this universe. So that's one idea. A lot of symbolism possibly there. Or we have Genesis, which says the world was created in 6 days and the Lord rested on the seventh. That's another hypothesis. So there must be many, many such hypotheses. And for today's purposes, I want to focus primarily on Hinduism. And in particular, three hypotheses. One, the hypothesis of Advaita Vedanta. Second, the hypothesis of Dvaita Vedanta. And third, in today's world, we cannot escape science. So the scientific hypothesis, shall we say, of how this universe came about. And these three hypotheses are widely different from each other. Advaita, for example, thinks that this universe came from Brahman. So Brahman is the material cause. of this universe. And that this universe is essentially a misunderstanding. Like we might misunderstand a rope for a snake. That this universe is really Brahman, but we, because of our ignorance, think of it as a series of objects. Dvaita Vedanta disagrees. It says this universe came from something called Prakriti, right? Primordial matter. So, where this universe came from differs substantially. Science, on the other hand, appears to think, at least one of the hypotheses, that this universe came from nothing and is in fact real and is made of matter. So, very different thinking patterns, very different propositions. And what I'm going to try and what I'm trying to say, going to try and say today is that all of these ideas come from the same creation equation, a small little mathematical equation whose multiple solutions are these different propositions of Advaita Vedanta, Dvaita Vedanta, and science. They all have a common origin, shall we say, in this creation equation of Hinduism. So that's what I want to basically do. And then if time permits, we will move on to some other topics. Okay. So let us start by proving this equation in the first place. And then we will go on to find solutions of that equation. And all of this is straightforward logic. So I'm going to take it step by step. Please stay with me for the next few minutes. Let us start with the Brahman assumption that was made by Advaita Vedanta. And that assumption was that Brahman is Satyam, which is existence, Jnanam, which is consciousness, and Anantam, that is infinity. Now, existence is everywhere and is the same everywhere. Consciousness is everywhere and is the same everywhere. What that means is that Brahman is everywhere and same everywhere. In other words, Brahman is homogeneous, identical everywhere. Okay? All right. Anantam. Anantam means that Brahman is infinite in space. So, Brahman is homogeneous, it is everywhere, and is infinite in space. If there is such an entity, that entity cannot change. We talked earlier in one of the sessions that Brahman cannot be cut, for example. Why is it that he cannot be cut? Because cutting means that you are creating some space where that material is not. And since Brahman has always got to be everywhere, it cannot be cut. So that's our first conclusion. This is not a new assumption. It just follows from the Brahman assumption that Brahman stays the same all the time. No change. Okay, that's number one. Number two, infinite also means infinite in time. In other words, Brahman always was, still is, will always be unchanged. Right? Okay, so we have two things here. Brahman does not change, and Brahman is infinite in time. Since the universe came later, it obviously means that Brahman is the first cause of the universe. The universe must have come from Brahman because there was nothing else to come from. Nothing also did not exist. Only Brahman was. So, two things that follow logically. One, universe is came from Brahman. And two, Brahman never changes. So those are important for us today. Now, let's come back to how we as human beings produce anything, right? Let us say, for example, that we want to produce Shrikhanda. Everybody knows Shrikhanda. And we have some starting material called milk. So we want to produce Shrikhanda out of milk. And let's say that we have 3 gallons of milk sitting in the refrigerator. And let us call that X. So X is the initial amount of milk that we have. Let us say that we decide that we will make Shrikhanda out of 1 gallon of milk. We have 3 gallons, but that's too much. We are going to use 1 gallon. Let us call that Y. So Y is the amount of material used to make our product. Our product is Shrikhanda. And there is a process for doing this. We will come back to the question of process later on. But right now we know that we started with X, we used up Y. So how much milk is left? X minus Y, right? If we started with 3 gallons, we used up 1 gallon, we are left with 3 minus 1 or 2 gallons of milk. That is how the human process works. Everything we produce it using this idea. Now let us apply this idea to Brahman and the creation of the universe. So let us say that the initial amount of Brahman is X. Since Brahman is the material cause of the universe, a portion of it called Y got used up in the process of creation. If this universe came from Brahman, something must have been used up, just like the milk was used up. So how much Brahman is left after creating the universe? X minus Y. The initial amount of Brahman minus the amount of Brahman used to create the universe is what is left. But what is our assumption regarding Brahman? Brahman never changes. So what is this X minus Y equal to? It must be equal to X, the original amount of Brahman, because Brahman never changes. It can create universes without change, without changing. So the creation equation of Advaita Vedanta is very simple. X minus Y is equal to X. The original amount of Brahman minus the amount of Brahman used to make the universe must be what remains. Since Brahman cannot change, what remains must be equal to X, the original Brahman. Right? Okay, let me share my screen for a minute. So here is our creation equation. X minus y is equal to x, where for Advaita Vedanta purposes, X was Brahman, Y was the part of Brahman used to make the universe. Those were the definitions of X and Y. Now, since we are going to use this equation not just for Advaita Vedanta, but also for Dvaita Vedanta and also for science, I want to generalize the definition of X and Y. Because science, for example, does not believe in Brahman. So we cannot call X Brahman for general purposes. So what I have now done is to say that X is whatever starting material you want to think about. So X could be Brahman, it could be Prakriti, it could be consciousness, it could be matter, it could be combination of consciousness and matter. Maybe it is nothing. Maybe it is energy. You decide what this starting material is, and Y is the amount of starting material that was used to create the universe. So this allows us to also consider Dvaita, Vedanta, and science. So a little redefinition, not limiting X to have to be Brahman. The equation itself does not change. We continue to use this equation, but with slightly different understanding of what X is and what Y is. So this is the creation equation of Hinduism. Now, let's think about what the solutions to this equation are, right? By solutions, we mean finding the values of X and Y that satisfy this equation, right? I'm going to spend a couple of minutes on it because this is probably at the level of middle school, but let's take a couple of minutes to try to solve this. So one solution is that Y is equal to 0. Suppose Y is equal to 0. Then the equation becomes X is equal to X, which is obviously true, right? So one solution is Y is equal to 0. And X can be anything. X can be anything. So Y equal to 0 and X to be anything is one solution to this equation. Not the only solution. Remember, this is one equation with two unknowns. So you're going to have multiple solutions. So this is solution number one. Now, suppose Y is greater than 0, right? Suppose Y is equal to 10. Then X minus 10 is obviously not equal to X. So what is the value of X where this equation would still be correct when Y is equal to 10? The answer is that X will have to be infinity. Because infinity, if X is infinity, then infinity minus anything is infinity. So a second solution to this equation is this: that the amount of material that was used to produce the universe is greater than 0. And if that were the case, then the original amount of material, the starting material, would have to be infinite for it not to change. because infinity minus anything is infinity. Right? The third solution to this equation is that both x and y are 0. So you have 0 minus 0 equals 0. So there are at least 3 possible solutions to this equation, right? Solution 1, y is equal to 0. What does that mean? That means universe was created without using any starting material, because y is the amount of material used to create the universe. And if this is 0, that means none of x was used to create the universe. And this is exactly the position that is taken by Advaita Vedanta. This is the Advaita Vedanta solution of the creation equation, which says that Brahman, which is X, Brahman never changed. None of it was used in creating the universe. Right? This is the so-called Vivarta way of transformation. The second solution here, we'll talk a little bit more about it in just a few minutes, will correspond to the Dvaita Vedanta thinking pattern. And the third solution here would correspond to science. So essentially, what we have done so far is to say that there is, just on the basis of simple standard first principles, there is a creation equation that looks like this. And this creation equation comes straight from our Brahman assumption that we made in session 1. We have not made any additional assumptions in deriving this equation. And the second thing we have done so far is to say that this equation has 3 solutions. And now our objective is to show that these 3 solutions correspond to Advaita, Dvaita, and science. Right? So let us look at that a little bit. As I mentioned before, it is easy to see that the very first solution corresponds to Advaita Vedanta. Because what is the position taken by Advaita Vedanta? It says that Brahman is the first cause. So obviously the universe came from Brahman, but it came from Brahman just like the snake is a misunderstanding of the rope. So when we misunderstand the rope for a snake, the rope never changes. Right? So this is producing an effect without a change in cause. Right? We looked at that subject before in session 3 under causality. Right? So that is exactly what this first solution is saying, that we have Brahman, X, which is something greater than 0. And none of it was used. Y is 0. None of it was used in the production of this universe. So this universe came about without any change in Brahman, which obviously means that this universe is Brahman. And it is simply a misunderstanding of Brahman, right, caused by Maya. So Maya is the process cause of creating this universe out of Brahman without a change in Brahman. And we'll come back to the subject of Maya in a little bit. Now, let's look at Dvaita Vedanta. Dvaita Vedanta proposes the following. It says that there are actually two starting points. One is Brahman, but the other is Prakriti. Right? What is Prakriti? You might think of it as primordial matter. So we now have two independent, coexisting realities, Brahman and Prakriti. Prakriti is the material cause of the universe. So Dvaita Vedanta differs from Advaita. Advaita said Brahman is the cause of the universe, material cause. Dvaita says, no, it is Prakriti that is the material cause of the universe. And this universe comes about because of an interaction between Prakriti and Brahman. So this universe comes about, it expands, eventually the rate of expansion reduces, and finally it reverses. So the universe expands and eventually begins to contract, and it dissolves back into Prakriti. Right? It dissolves back into Prakriti. This is very similar to when children play with Play-Doh, right? You have a glob of Play-Doh and you make something out of it, and eventually you put it all back and you get your Play-Doh back the way it was. No change. So that is one proposition of Dvaita Vedanta, the oscillating universe. And it goes on eventually to tell you that there are kalpas and yugas and so many years, etc., etc. I won't go into those byways and city streets, but just staying with the highways. The basic idea is that the universe expands and then contracts, and this expansion and contraction continues, right? So that if you think about it as one cycle, what happens in one cycle? What happens in one cycle is that from Prakriti comes universe, and then it eventually goes back into Prakriti, meaning that zero amount of Prakriti gets used up in each cycle. So if you say how much Prakriti was used in one cycle of expansion and contraction, the answer is the same answer we had before, which is that y is equal to 0. So this very first solution, y equal to 0, x equal to is greater than 0, applies to Dvaita Vedanta as well, if you look at it from the point of a complete cycle. From the point of complete cycle, assuming, of course, that there is a cyclic universe. That may actually be true or may not be true. But if there is a cyclic universe as proposed, then the first equation also applies to Dvaita Vedanta. What if there is not a cyclic universe? What if the expansion of the universe continues and it never gets to a stage of contraction, as some people think? Or what if there are parallel universes, as some other people think? They are all parts of a Dvaita approach, right? A Dvaita approach simply means that there are two starting points, two realities. One Brahman, which is consciousness, and the other Prakriti, which is matter. And since matter and consciousness are not the same, that's why we call it Dvaita. So in a situation where there are an infinite number of parallel universes, or where there is no cyclic universe, that the universe continues to expand, the second solution of this equation applies. Because now, if the universe continues to expand and never comes back, then Prakriti is getting depleted in the creation of every universe. And if there are a very large number of parallel universes, then you would need Prakriti to be infinite, to be able to supply the material needed for the creation of all of these universes. So, in that situation, under Dvaita hypothesis, the second solution of this creation equation would apply, where Prakriti is infinite and some of it gets used for the creation of every universe that is out there. But ultimately, Prakriti never changes because it has an infinite supply of material. So that is the second equation applies in the case of Dvaita Vedanta under those circumstances. Now, let us come to science. The proposal in science, and I would suggest, if you're interested in this to a greater extent, that you look up the videos on YouTube by one Dr. Michio Kaku, Kaku, Kaku. He's a astrophysicist of renown, a Japanese American, co-inventor of string theory, and he has a number of videos on various topics, one of which is the creation of the universe itself. Or we can have some astrophysics professor come and tell us about all of this at some point in time. But my understanding of the subject, which is very little, is this: that the universe has matter, which is, Earth and sun and galaxies and so on. That matter has a huge amount of energy. Universe also has gravity. And the gravity implies a very large amount of energy also, except that the gravitational energy is considered negative energy for some reasons. It has to do with the loss of potential energy, etc. Let's not go there at the moment. So what you have is a large amount of positive energy represented by matter and a large amount of negative energy represented by gravity. It so turns out, according to certain thinking patterns, that the two energies, the positive energy and the negative energy, are exactly equal, meaning that the total energy of this universe is zero. And this is why you sometimes hear people talking about this universe is free lunch, meaning that it came out of nothing, right? It came out of nothing. Nothing meaning zero energy. It did not require any energy for the creation of this universe. How did that happen? Well, what science seems to be saying is that this so-called nothing, which is, what is nothing? It would be absolute vacuum, for example. So this so-called nothing is really not nothing. It is something. And what is something? The something is that there are virtual particles, matter and antimatter particles that are getting created and they die. Okay. And this creation and death of those particles is what is suggested by quantum mechanics. So it turns out, according to this theory, that if a certain number of matter particles escaped, then that is where the Big Bang came from. So that the original energy required for the creation of this universe, it's like saying that the energy is zero, but zero is equal to very large positive minus very large negative. So it's like 10 to the 50 minus 10 to the 50 is still zero. And the positive 10 to the 50 is what created matter in the universe. And the negative 10 to the 50 is what created gravity in the universe, always keeping the total energy zero. So that is the general idea in very broad terms of how this universe got created. And if that is in fact so, then this third solution to the equation, which says that x is zero, y is zero, meaning that the starting energy was zero and the energy used in the creation of the universe is also zero. Right? So this third solution to the equation corresponds to this general idea that quantum fluctuations sparked inflation and eventually Big Bang. So let me just summarize. We started from our starting point was the Brahman assumption. From that Brahman assumption, without making any other assumption, we derived an equation for the creation of the universe from Brahman. We generalized the definition of X and Y by allowing it to be either Brahman or Prakriti or energy, or for that matter, anything else that somebody proposes. Using the same equation, we then said that there are three solutions to that equation, which are here. And these three solutions correspond to Advaita Vedanta proposition, which is that Brahman is the only reality and this universe is just a misunderstanding of Brahman. The Dvaita Vedanta proposition, which is that there are two starting points, a material cause and a process cause. And the material cause is Prakriti, and that's where this universe came from. And the scientific proposition, which says that this universe came from nothing. Right? So all of these three ideas are the solutions of the same creation equation of Hinduism. So that was my first point. Let me go to a couple of other things. One is, what is this Prakriti? So we said that Prakriti is primordial matter. So it's some kind of matter. And the assumption that was made by Sankhya philosophers, a very important assumption within Hinduism. It applies to all kinds of different things. For example, it is this assumption that directly leads to the Varna system of Hinduism, the original Varna system, not the caste system, but the original Varna system, follows directly, mathematically, follows from this assumption that is made by Sankhya philosophers. And what is that assumption? That assumption is that Prakriti consists of three things: Sattva, Rajas, and Tamas. So in a sense, Prakriti is just like lemonade, right? How do we make lemonade? We have lemon juice, salt, sugar, water. You mix them all together, you end up with lemonade. Prakriti is Sattva, Rajas, and Tamas, and you mix them in different proportions, and you end up with Prakriti. Just like if you change the amount, the percentage, not necessarily the amount, but the percentage of sugar. If the percentage of sugar in lemonade is large, the lemonade is sweet. If the percentage of salt is large, it's salty, and so on. In a similar fashion, you might say that if the percentage of sattva in an individual, in a human being, is large, he is a sattvic person. If the percentage of rajas in a human being is large, he is a rajasic person, and so on, right? So from a conceptual standpoint, Prakriti is basically the same as making lemonade. And that has some mathematical implications, which we shall consider at some other point in time in the future. Another way to look at Prakriti is from a scientific standpoint, is to say, what does science say? Well, science says that there is an atom, and that atom consists of protons, electrons, and neutrons. Three things, once again. Like Sattva, Rajas, and Tamas, three things: proton, electron, neutron. And if you look at the periodic table, the very first element is hydrogen, which has one proton, one electron, and no neutrons. The second element in the periodic table is helium. It has two protons, two electrons, and two neutrons. The third one is lithium, which has three protons, three electrons, and four neutrons. So as you go up and up in that periodic table, you always end up adding one electron and one proton, and you get a different element. So science is saying that there are three things that matter in the creation of the universe: electron, proton, and neutron. And by combining these three things in different numbers, you end up with this universe. What did the Sankhya philosophers say? They said that there are three things that matter: Sattva, Rajas, and Tamas. And by combining these three things in different proportions, you end up with this universe. So in a sense, conceptually, it's a similar thinking pattern. The difference is that in the case of Prakriti, it is the proportion that matters. In the case of science, it is the number that matters. And the mathematics becomes completely different, whether you're dealing with proportions or numbers. And that has certain important consequences, which we will look at later. Finally, what about Maya? So we have Prakriti in Dvaita Vedanta. And when Advaita Vedanta came along, it said we don't need these two infinities, one for Prakriti and one for Brahman. Let's just combine them together. And let's get rid of Prakriti in a sense and call it Maya as a power of Brahman. So Maya became the veiling power and the projecting power of Brahman. So in Advaita Vedanta, Brahman continues to be, the original Brahman continues to be the material cause, but he is now endowed with a new power called Maya. And Maya is the process cause that creates this universe without a change in Brahman. So it's almost like magic, right? It's not real. Brahman is the real thing. This universe is kind of fake in a way. It's not exactly fake, but you understand the idea. It's like magic, and this magic is created by Maya. So Maya is the magician who uses Brahman to create magic, and that magic is what we call universe. So when science is trying to understand what this universe is, in a sense, according to Advaita Vedanta, science is understanding magic. Science is not understanding Maya, because you might understand the magic, but just understanding the magic doesn't mean that you understand the magician, right? The magician is a different entity. Magic is something different. So science, when we say that we have these laws of physics and so forth, what are those? According to Advaita Vedanta interpretation, those are the rules of magic that is being played. And ultimately, science will never be able to understand the magician nor Brahman, right? So my purpose, I'm going to stop here in view of the time. My purpose here was basically one thing, which is to say that we have different theories of different hypotheses, shall we say, of what this universe is and how it came about. But there is an approach here that says that we can try to unify these ideas in certain sense, in the sense that we can show that they all came from the same creation equation, right? So that was the main point. Let me stop here. Thank you.
Anand?
Thank you, Anand. Very good explanation and brilliantly said. I do remember you mentioning some time ago in one of your talks at the temple that creation equation also has a solution: infinity minus infinity equals infinity. And then you use that to explain Purnamada Purnamidam Purnat Purnamudachyate. Am I
Yes.
correct?
Yes. Yeah, yes, I did that.
So that would be another solution to it.
Yeah, but that's right. That would be another possibility.
Okay.
But
Thank you.
yeah.
Anand?
Yeah.
Congratulations. Fantastic presentation, and the way you analyzed it beautifully for non-scientists like me to understand what you're saying, it made it easier. And what really amazes me is that our brilliant forefathers, the Nasiri Sukta, reminded us that our quest for knowledge and accepting the fact that we don't understand fully is the correct way of approaching anything in life. Sometimes this journey of going through the question, this challenging question that you're talking about, is sometimes more enlightening and satisfying than the answer itself sometimes. So I think I'm glad you're going through this discussion and systematically the way you did it. I'm really happy, excited, proud of you. Can't say proud, you know what I mean. I'm really happy that you did it because it's not an easy subject to understand, but it makes me feel good about our forefathers. It requires an individual with self-confidence to come up and say, I don't understand it fully. But let me bring you to a place where I understand so far. This is my question, not being afraid to ask, seek help from other people who may or may not know more than he or she does. So to me, that's really admirable for our forefathers, something inspiring for all of us to continue to pursue to find out an answer, and then ultimately come up to say, I don't know. So I'm glad you're continuing it, but you are not done yet. You're still on the hook. You have to keep on going. And I mean, I can give you a lot of quotations from Nasiri Sutra now, but that's not the purpose. Really, to tell you, you did a brilliant job, examine it, analyze it, clarified it, and explained to us. Thank you very much.
Yeah, that's
Yes, it is.
I completely agree with that. That, you know, if you ask the question, how much progress have we really made in answering this question? What is this universe and where did it come from? Right? There was a physics Nobel laureate by the name of Richard Feynman. Many of you would probably know. He's written great books. I mean, he's quite a promoter of himself too. And there is this book that he wrote, Surely You Must Be Joking, Mr. Feynman. And many of you might have read that. It's an excellent book. And as the way he tells the story, this was when he was an undergraduate and had to take a class in English poetry or something, which he was hated. Didn't like that at all.
Typical scientist, yeah.
And then he ended up with an assignment that the professor gave to write a poem, which was even worse in a way, and for him. And so he had to complete that assignment for his grade. So this is what he wrote. I wonder why. I wonder why. I wonder why I wonder. That's it. You got an A in the course.
Wonderful.
So, you know, this idea, we are still wondering as to where all these things came from and what they really are, right? So yes, we have made some progress. We understand things a little bit better from the time of Nasiriya Sukta possibly, but we are not there yet. So I agree with what Dr. Sane said.
That was so good. Yeah. No, I just wanted to say it was just a wonderful lecture. Yeah. Yeah. Amazing. Yeah. Thank you.
Thank you.
Arvind, just an addition for you, being a scientist, and I'm just a dumb doctor here. Remember we talked about Big Bang theory?
Yes.
And the thought comes to my mind is negative energy, positive energy, total bottom line is zero. With gravity on one side is negative, another being positive. It is very much similar to what happens when you crack your knuckles. The mother told you not to do that. It is the evacuation of vacuum phenomena that air comes in and cracks out. Nothing happens at that time, hopefully not, but at least makes big noise. So I think that goes along with the so-called Big Bang theory we're talking about. Something to think about, okay?
Hi,
Okay.
this is Madhavi. Thank you again. A very, very brilliant analysis and made so many concepts clear with mathematics as the basis of all this explanation. So thank you. And in modern terms, it gives a different perspective for us to understand. What it brought to mind was Amrutanubhav. Have you read Amrutanubhav of Naneshwar? So it is worth
No,
reading. I
no.
think you will enjoy it. This is one of the lesser known and lesser read works of Naneshwar, which was actually, he was encouraged to do that after he wrote the Naneshwari, because Naneshwari was what he wrote a commentary on an original from Sri Krishna, from Bhagavad Gita. It was a commentary. It was not an original work of his. It was original in the sense of the commentary, but the subject matter was from some other author. But then he composed this Amrutanubhav, in which he has logically given an explanation with all these other philosophies, why they don't measure up in the end. So that would be a very interesting read for whoever is wanting that. All these Sankhya philosophies and nihilistic views and all, why in the end they are refuted by Advait philosophy. It's a very good logical way from Naneshwar. So the brilliance of his scholar work is there more than the poetic work he has done in Naneshwari. Here it is a very scientific and logical explanation. So worth read. I just wanted to add that.
Yeah, that would be wonderful to have somebody give a talk on it. It sounds like a great subject.
Yeah.
Idea on you.
Okay.
Let us suppose that it's way past midnight.
Uh-huh.
You can't sleep. You're sitting in your living room in the pitch dark
Uh-huh.
and getting a little cold. So you start the fireplace.
Yeah.
And the fireplace has black coals, which in this analogy would be Brahman.
Mm-hmm.
And there is no light in that fireplace yet, but heat is coming out.
Yeah.
So you're getting a little warmth out of it.
Uh-huh.
That heat is like Sat and Chit.
Mm-hmm.
It is like consciousness.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, it is an intrinsic property of the coal to become hot,
Mm-hmm.
right? The heat does not affect the coal, but it affects people outside, but not the coal itself.
Mm-hmm.
But there is no light, you still can't see anything.
Mm-hmm.
But then what happens is that somehow or the other, light comes out of that fireplace, right? There is fire.
Mm-hmm.
That fire is Maya.
Mm-hmm.
That fire is also throughout the coal. And two things happen because of it. One is that you cannot see the black coal. In other words, it hides the coal, just like Maya hides Brahman from you. And the second is that this living room, which is your universe, which you could not see anything before, starts appearing.
Mm-hmm.
Right? You can now see the sofa set, the love seat, all the trinkets that you have collected over the years. They all start appearing as different objects.
Mm-hmm.
And depending upon the fire, there is some movement. It looks like the shadows are lengthening, shortening. Something is getting brighter, something is getting darker. There is a continuous change in the surroundings around you, just like this universe is continuously changing.
Mm-hmm.
So that is the closest I have come so far in trying to suggest what Maya is, right? It has two functions.
Mm-hmm.
One is to hide Brahman from us, so we cannot see him. And the second is to project the universe, right?
Mm-hmm.
I mean, ultimately, I think it is good to have some mental picture of things. And of course, we realize that any mental picture is not 100% right. It can never be, otherwise, you would have found Maya and Brahman. So, but it is nice to have something so that as you listen to other people talk and or read something or see a YouTube video, you can always compare it and refine that picture over the course of time, right? So it'd be interesting to see what other possibilities there might be for what is Maya.
We could keep on discussing on that for a long time. But if you read, go back to my notes in Kumud's book that is with you, talking from feelings of grief to sense of gratitude, that article, I mention in that where the things are not as they seem to be unless you have a clear understanding as to what is behind it. For example, a crystal which is clear in reality looks of different color based upon the kind of hibiscus flower is behind it. We're talking about coal in this case. I gave an example of iron. Iron per se is hard, cold, and black. But when you see a burning iron is red hot, you have to understand the true reality that this is not the true nature of iron, but it has come from heat, which is totally a different element of the natural element. So what I'm trying to say is that particular thing explains as to the things are different than what we think, and there's a reason behind it. And behind that we discuss is that is Brahman. But again, read that one from that point of view, talking about fire and cold things, and then we'll talk about it again. But very fascinating thought process of keeping your body warm on a cold night near the fireplace. Thank you.
Just quickly wanted to add, my wife, when I married her, she said, well, I cannot enjoy watching movie. And I was kind of surprised by that. They were like, why? And she goes, well, I cannot get past of thinking that all these actors that I'm watching are just acting. It's not really happening. And I cannot get past that, so I cannot enjoy a movie. And if Maya is kind of similar, if you wanted to enjoy a movie, you have to kind of get past that. Or nowadays, I don't enjoy movie as much either because that what my wife said kind of resonates with me. Like, yeah, I cannot really appreciate the feeling that is going on to the actor. So to enjoy Maya, you have to forget that yes, these are actors. Or to enjoy the movie, I have to forget that this is a screen and this is a projection that's happening.
Yeah.
And so I think Maya is like we intentionally choose to forget our real self and enjoy it by playing the character. But yeah, I just wanted to add that. I think it's pretty interesting way
Yeah.
to look at Maya.
Yeah, that's interesting. Yes.